The stars burned cold in the void as Admiral Kreeth stood on the bridge of his flagship. His crystalline body caught the light from distant suns, throwing rainbow patterns across the metal walls. Behind him, 1,000 Velkoth warriors worked, at their stations. Their movements were perfect. Every action matched exactly with the others. They moved like one giant mind controlling many bodies. Kreeth looked at the view screen. Below them, the planet Xerion spun slowly. Its blue oceans and green lands looked peaceful. But peace would not last long. The Velkoth Empire had come to claim another world. All ships report status, Kreeth commanded. His voice echoed through the communication channels to every vessel in his fleet. 200 ships floated in perfect formation around Xerion. Each ship was exactly where it should be. No mistakes, no disorder. This was how the Velkoth fought wars. "Admiral," said Commander Vextar, stepping forward. "The planet's defense fleet has been destroyed. 15 ships. They lasted 12 minutes. Kreeth nodded. 12 minutes was longer than most. The aliens of Xerion had tried to fight. They had small, fast ships with energy weapons. But speed meant nothing when facing the Velkoth. Organization always won against chaos. "Open communication channels to all inhabited worlds in this sector," Kreeth ordered. "It is time for another lesson." The main screen changed. Instead of showing Xerion, it now displayed dozens of alien faces, bird-like Syrians with bright feathers, nautiloids with their large wet eyes, Chitauri with their insect features. All of them looked afraid. Fear was good. Fear made surrender easier. Kreeth walked closer to the screen. His crystal shell reflected the lights, making him appear even more frightening. "I am Admiral Kreeth of the Velkoth Empire. You have witnessed the fall of Xerion. This is what happens to worlds that resist us." One of the Syrian leaders spoke up. His feathers were shaking. "Admiral, please. Our worlds pose no threat to your empire. We are peaceful traders. We have families, children." "Your weakness is noted," Kreeth interrupted. "The Velkoth Empire does not negotiate with the weak. We are the perfect warriors. We evolved for war while you evolved for trade and art and other useless things. No species in this galaxy understands warfare like we do." The Admiral moved to the center of the bridge. Every Velkoth warrior stopped, working, and turned to face him. They all moved at exactly the same time. It was beautiful and terrifying. "Look at us," Kreeth continued, spreading his arms wide. "We think as one mind. We move as one body. We fight as one weapon. When we attack, every shot is perfectly aimed. Every ship moves to the right place at the right time. We do not make mistakes because we do not think like individuals. We are evolution's answer to war itself." A nautiloid representative tried to speak. "Admiral, surely we can reach some agreement. Our worlds have resources. We can trade." "You still do not understand," Kreeth said, his voice growing harder. "We do not want your resources. We want your submission. The galaxy will belong to the Velkoth Empire because we are the only species that truly commands war. Submit now, and your people will live as our servants. Resist, and they will join the void." The communication ended. Kreeth had made his point. Soon the surrender messages would begin arriving. They always did. Meanwhile, far beyond the edge of the Andorian sector, a small human ship drifted through space. The UES Busan was not a warship. It was a research vessel, designed to study new star systems and look for planets that humans might one day call home. Its crew of 35 people had been traveling for 8 months, mapping unknown regions of the galaxy. Captain Lee Minho sat in his command chair, reading reports from his science teams. At 42 years old, he had spent most of his adult life in space. He had gray hair starting to show at his temples, and kind eyes that had seen many wonders among the stars. But today something was different. "Captain," called Lieutenant Kim Daeho from the communication station. "I'm picking up a transmission. It's being broadcast on all frequencies." Minho looked up from his datapad. "From where?" "The Andorian sector, sir. About 15 light years. From our position." "Put it on the main screen." The bridge of the Busan was small compared to military vessels. Only 6 people worked there during normal shifts. Besides Minho and Daeho, there was Ensign Park Nari at the science station, Lieutenant Commander Yoon Jiwoo at engineering controls, and 2 junior officers managing navigation and sensors. The transmission began playing. Everyone on the bridge watched as the crystal-covered alien appeared on their screen. They listened to Admiral Creeth's words about perfect warriors and submission. They saw the fear in the alien representatives' faces. When the transmission ended, the bridge was quiet for a long moment. "Has Earth ever made contact with any of these species?" asked Park Nari. She was young, only 26, and this was her first deep space mission. "No," Minho replied. "We've never traveled this far into the galactic core before. These are all first contacts for humanity." Yoon Jiwoo spoke from her engineering station. "Captain, should we move away from this sector? If these Velkoth are as dangerous as they claim." "No," Minho said firmly. "We need more information. Daeho, can you intercept any other communications from that area?" Lieutenant Daeho worked at his controls for several minutes. His face grew more serious as he found more signals. "Sir, I'm reading multiple surrender transmissions. At least 6 different species have agreed to Velkoth terms in the last hour." "What kind of terms?" Minho asked. "Complete submission, surrender of all military forces, Velkoth governors to be placed on all major worlds." Daeho paused, reading more data. "Captain, it looks like this empire has conquered 15 star systems in just 3 months." Park Nari turned from her science station. "Sir, I'm detecting weapon signatures from the battle near Zarion. The Velkoth ships use coordinated energy beams and kinetic missiles. Their tactics appear to be based on overwhelming numerical superiority and perfect timing." "Perfect timing," Minho repeated thoughtfully. "That suggests they plan every move in advance." "Yes, sir. The attack patterns show no variation, no improvisation. Everything follows preset formations." Commander Yoon Jiwoo stood up from her station. She was the oldest member of the bridge crew at 51 and had served in the Earth Navy before joining the Exploration Service. "Captain, with respect, this isn't our fight. We're explorers, not soldiers." Minho nodded. "You're right, Commander. But we may be the only humans in this region of space. Earth needs to know what's happening out here." "Sir," Daeho interrupted, "I'm receiving another transmission. This one is directed specifically at us." Everyone turned to look at the communication officer. "At us?" Minho asked. "How is that possible?" "Unknown, sir. But it's definitely targeted at our position and using our communication protocols." "Put it through." The screen showed a different alien this time. This one had blue-green scales and large, intelligent eyes. The creature looked exhausted and afraid. "Unknown vessel," the alien said. "This is Governor Thessian of the Zirian colony. We detected your ship on our long-range sensors before." The alien's voice broke for a moment. "Before our world fell. If you can hear this message, please send word to any spacefaring civilizations you know. Tell them about the Velkoth. Tell them what happened here. They claim to command war itself, and no one has found a way to stop them." The transmission ended with coordinates for several refugee ships that had escaped Xerion's destruction. "Captain." Minho stood up and walked to the main viewing port. Outside, the stars looked the same as always. But he knew that somewhere among those distant lights, an empire was growing. An empire that believed it had mastered warfare. "Nari," he said without turning around, "analyze everything we've intercepted about Velkoth military tactics. I want a complete report." "Yes, sir." "Daeho, contact those refugee ships. If any survivors are willing to talk, I want to hear their stories." "Understood, Captain." "Jiwoo, plot a course back toward Earth space. Maximum sustainable speed." The engineering commander looked surprised. "Sir, that will take us 11 months at best." Minho turned back to face his crew. "Then we better send a priority message ahead of us. Earth Fleet Command needs to know about the Velkoth Empire. They need to know about species that claim to command war." "What should the message say, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Daeho. Minho thought for a moment. He looked again at the screen where Governor Thessian's desperate face had appeared. He thought about the fear in the alien representatives' voices. He considered the cold confidence of Admiral Creeth. Tell Earth Command that we've discovered a military empire that has conquered 15 star systems using superior tactics and organization. Tell them the Velkoth believe they are the galaxy's perfect warriors. And tell them. Minho paused. Tell them that these aliens have never encountered humans before. Over the next few hours, the crew of the Busan worked to gather as much information as possible. They contacted 3 refugee ships and spoke with survivors from different worlds. The stories were all similar. The Velkoth would arrive with overwhelming numbers. They would demonstrate their perfect coordination and tactical superiority. Then they would offer terms: surrender or die. Most species surrendered. The few that chose to fight were destroyed quickly and efficiently. The Velkoth never seemed to lose ships in these battles. Their formations were too perfect. Their Tia. 6 days after Captain Lee Minho sent his message, Admiral Choi Hyunwoo sat in his office on Luna Station, reading the transmission for the 3rd time. Rain fell against the massive viewing windows that looked out over the lunar surface. Earth hung in the black sky like a blue marble, peaceful and beautiful. But the Admiral's mind was not on peaceful things. Hyunwoo was 63 years old and had commanded Earth Fleet for 8 years. His gray hair was cut short in military style, and his dark eyes showed the weight of many difficult decisions. He had fought in the Martian independence wars 15 years ago. He had seen what happened when humans went to war. Now, apparently, war might be coming to them. Computer, connect me to General Nam Soo-jin and Dr. Kang Min-ji, he said aloud. Within minutes, 2 figures appeared on his holographic display. General Nam Soo-jin was at the Marine Training Center on Europa. She was younger than Hyunwoo, only 45. But she had more actual combat experience than anyone else in Earth's military. Her black hair was pulled back tightly, and her uniform was perfect as always. Dr. Kang Min-ji appeared from her laboratory on Earth. At 38, she was the leading expert on alien biology and psychology. She had studied every form of life humans had encountered in their expansion into space. Her workspace behind her was filled with star charts and biological data displays. "You've both read Captain Minho's report?" Admiral Hyunwoo asked. "Yes, sir." General Soo-jin replied immediately. The Velkoth Empire represents a clear threat to human expansion and potentially to Earth itself. Dr. Min-ji nodded more slowly. "Admiral, the psychological profile is concerning. These Velkoth appear to have evolved as a hive mind species. Individual creativity has been replaced by collective coordination. That makes them extremely effective at conventional warfare." "Conventional warfare," Hyunwoo repeated. "What about unconventional warfare?" "That's harder to assess without more data," Dr. Min-ji said. "But hive mind species typically have difficulty adapting to unexpected situations. They plan perfectly, but they don't improvise well." General Soo-jin leaned forward. "Admiral, I recommend immediate military deployment to the Andorian sector. We should assess the threat level directly and potentially make contact with surviving allied species." "With what forces?" Hyunwoo asked. "Our nearest ships are months away from that region. The Sol is completing its shakedown cruise in the Centauri system," Soo-jin replied. "Captain Shin Taehyung's crew has been training on the new quantum weapon systems. The ship could reach the Andorian sector in 3 weeks. Dr. Min-ji looked concerned. "General, sending one ship against an empire that has conquered 40 worlds seems exactly like something humans would do," Soo-jin interrupted. "Doctor, with respect, you study aliens. I study war. These Velkoth have been successful because they fight predictable enemies with predictable tactics. They've never faced humans." Admiral Hyunwoo had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. "Dr. Min-ji, in your opinion, what would happen if we tried to negotiate with this empire? Based on the psychological profile, negotiation would be seen as weakness. The Velkoth appear to believe that military superiority is the only meaningful form of communication. They would likely demand immediate surrender. And if we surrendered, humanity would become a servant species. Our creativity and independence would be seen as dangerous. They would probably try to change our society to match their hive mind structure." General Soo-jin made a sound of disgust. That will never happen. Then we're looking at eventual conflict, Hyunwoo said. The question is whether we engage now on our terms or wait for them to find Earth. The three leaders sat in silence for a moment. Outside the Admiral's window, Earth continued its slow rotation. Somewhere on that blue world, 3 billion humans lived their lives. Most of them had never heard of the Velkoth Empire. Most of them had no idea that their future might depend on decisions made in the next few hours. Tell me about the Soul, Admiral Hyunwoo said finally. General Soo-jin straightened. It's our most advanced battleship. Quantum torpedo systems, adaptive AI targeting, enhanced shielding. But more importantly, Captain Taehyung's crew represents our best tactical thinking. How? So? They're trained in asymmetric warfare. Instead of fighting like every other species, formations, predetermined tactics, standard procedures, they're taught to improvise. Every simulation they run is different. Every battle plan changes based on real-time conditions. Dr. Minji looked interested. That sounds like the opposite of Velkoth methodology. Exactly, Soo-jin said. The Velkoth perfect their tactics by repetition. Humans perfect their tactics by variation. Admiral Hyunwoo stood up and walked to his window. Earth looked so peaceful from here. If we send the Soul, what would their mission be? Initially reconnaissance, General Soo-jin replied. Assess Velkoth capabilities, make contact with refugee populations, gather intelligence. And if they're discovered, then Captain Taehyung improvises. The Admiral turned back to face the holographic displays. Dr. Minji, what's your assessment of the risks? High, Admiral, but the alternative may be worse. If the Velkoth continue expanding, they will eventually reach human space. When that happens, they'll arrive with the combined resources of hundreds of conquered worlds. Better to face them now, while they only control 40 worlds? Better to face them before they know we exist. Admiral Hyunwoo made his decision. General Soo-jin, contact Captain Taehyung. The Soul is to depart for the Andorian sector immediately. Mission parameters, gather intelligence, assess threat level, and... He paused. And demonstrate human capabilities if necessary. Understood, sir. Dr. Minji, I want a complete xenological profile of the Velkoth sent to the Soul. Everything we can deduce from Captain Minho's data. I'll have it ready within 12 hours. 2 days later, Captain Shin Taehyung stood on the bridge of the UES Soul as it prepared to depart Centauri Station. He was 35 years old and had been commanding starships for 6 years. Unlike many military officers, he had studied history and philosophy before joining the Navy. He believed that understanding why humans fought was more important than understanding how they fought. The Soul was beautiful and deadly. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with lines that seemed to flow like water frozen in motion. The ship was 800 meters long and carried a crew of 200, but it was not the size that made it special. It was the technology and the people who used it. All stations report ready, Captain, said Commander Ojina, his first officer. She was 32 and had served with Taehyung for 3 years. They worked together like dancers who had practiced the same routine many times. Engineering reports quantum drive ready for jump, called Lieutenant Han Wubin from the weapons station. He was only 28 but had top scores in every tactical simulation Earth fleet had ever created. Navigation has our course laid in, reported Chief Petty Officer Lim So-young. She managed the Soul's shield and sensor systems with an expertise that bordered on instinctive. Marines are secured for departure, added Sergeant Major Bae Dong-yun over the communication system. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Captain Taehyung looked around his bridge. These were good people. Smart people. People who could think for themselves and work together without losing their individuality. The Velkoth had never faced anything like them. Take us out, Chief Lim. The Soul moved away from Centauri Station like a shadow sliding across. The stars. Within an hour, they were far enough from the star's gravity well to engage their quantum drive. Jump in 3, 2, 1. Engage. Space twisted around them, and the Soul vanished from the Centauri system. During the 3-week journey to The Andorian sector, the crew studied everything Earth Command had learned about the Velkoth Empire. They ran simulations based on the tactical data Captain Minho had gathered. They practiced scenarios that conventional military doctrine said were impossible. Dr. Minji's xenological report made for interesting reading. The Velkoth had evolved on a world where cooperation was necessary for survival. Over millions of years, they had developed a collective consciousness that allowed perfect coordination between individuals. This made them incredibly effective at large-scale operations, but it also made them vulnerable in ways they didn't realize. The key insight, Captain Taehyung explained to his senior staff during a briefing, is that they can't think outside their established patterns. When we watch their battle recordings, every engagement follows the same basic structure. They arrive in formation. They demonstrate overwhelming superiority. They offer surrender terms. If the terms are refused, they attack with predetermined tactics. "What happens if we don't follow their script?" asked Commander Ojina. "That's what we're going to find out." Lieutenant Han Wubin was studying weapon data on his personal tablet. "Captain, their ships appear to be heavily armed, but not particularly well shielded. They rely on not being hit rather than surviving hits. Meaning, their tactics assume they can control the range and timing of combat. If someone forced them into close-range fighting, they might not be prepared for it." Taehyung finished. "Good observation, what else?" Chief Lim So-young spoke up. "Sir, their communication systems seem to be constantly active. They coordinate everything in real time. If we could disrupt those communications, the soul dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Zirion system, like a ghost materializing from the void." Captain Shin Tae-hyung stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display update with new information. What he saw made his jaw tighten. 200 Velkoth ships hung in perfect formation around the planet Zirion. Their crystalline hulls caught the light from the system's star, creating a spectacular display of reflected rainbows. It would have been beautiful if it weren't so menacing. "Sensor sweep complete, Captain," reported Chief Lim So-young. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Velkoth fleet. They appear to be preparing for a final planetary bombardment." "Any signs of the planet's defenders?" asked Commander Ojina. "Negative. The orbital defense platforms have been destroyed. I'm detecting debris from approximately 15 ships in decaying orbits." Captain Taehyung studied the display. The Velkoth formation was exactly what Dr. Minji's report had predicted. Ships arranged in precise geometric patterns, each vessel maintaining perfect distance from its neighbors. No wasted movement, no redundancy. It was militarily efficient and completely predictable. "Lieutenant Wubin, analysis of their weapons systems?" The young tactical officer worked at his station for several minutes before responding. "Sir, they're using coordinated energy beams and kinetic missile systems. The interesting thing is that every ship fires at exactly the same moment. They're not targeting individual threats. They're creating overlapping fields of destruction." "Overlapping fields," Taehyung repeated thoughtfully. "That suggests they expect their enemies to maintain formation as well." "Yes, sir. Their tactics assume the enemy will fight conventionally." Sergeant Major Bae Dong-hyun's voice came over the communication system from the Marine deck. "Captain, are we going to help the people on that planet?" Tae-hyung looked at the planet on his screen. Zirion was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. Somewhere down there, millions of beings were waiting to discover their fate. The Velkoth would either accept their surrender or destroy their civilization. "That's exactly what we're going to do, Sergeant Major, but not in the way they expect." The captain turned to his crew. "All right, people. We're about to make first contact with a species that believes it commands war itself. They've never lost a battle. They've never encountered resistance they couldn't overcome. Today that changes." "Sir," Commander Ojina said quietly, "there are 200 of them and one of us, which means they'll underestimate us." Taehyung smiled grimly. "Chief Lim, take us closer. I want to decloak right in the middle of their formation." "Sir?" Chief Lim looked surprised. "That would put us in weapons range of 50 ships simultaneously." "Exactly. They won't expect anyone to be that aggressive. Their perfect formation becomes a trap if we're already inside it. The Soul moved forward under its cloaking field. The advanced stealth system was one of humanity's most closely guarded technologies. It didn't just hide the ship from sensors. It made it functionally invisible until the crew chose to reveal themselves. As they approached the Velkoth fleet, Captain Tae-hyung opened a channel to all stations. "This is the captain. In approximately 5 minutes, we're going to announce humanity's presence to the galaxy. Every one of you represents 3 billion humans who have never backed down from a fight. Show these aliens what that means." The Soul slipped between the Velkoth ships like a shadow moving through a crystal garden. The alien vessels maintained their perfect spacing, unaware that a human warship was now positioned at the exact center of their formation. "We're in position, Captain," Chief Lim reported. "Decloak us." The Soul suddenly appeared on every Velkoth sensor screen simultaneously. Admiral Kreeth, who had been reviewing surrender terms from 3 more species, looked up in shock as his officers reported the impossible. "Admiral," called one of his subordinates, "an unknown vessel has appeared inside our formation." "Impossible. Our sensors monitor all space within 10 light hours. Nothing could approach without detection." "Sir, it's right there." The Velkoth officer pointed at the tactical display. A sleek, dark ship hung in space exactly where their formation was weakest. Admiral Kreeth studied the new vessel. Its design was unlike anything in Velkoth databases. The hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, and the weapon emplacements were positioned in patterns that made no tactical sense according to established military doctrine. "Scan the ship. Identify its species and capabilities." "Sir, the scanning is being blocked. The vessel appears to be using some form of adaptive shielding." "Then we will ask them directly." Admiral Kreeth activated the fleet-wide communication system. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Velkoth space during military operations. Identify yourself and state your intentions." On the Soul's bridge, Captain Tae-hyung received the transmission. The Admiral's crystalline features appeared on the main screen, and his voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never been challenged. "Captain," Commander Ojina said quietly, 200 ships have us targeted." "Let them." Tae-hyung stepped forward and activated the communication system. "Admiral Kreeth, I presume. This is Captain Shin Tae-hyung of the United Earthship Soul. You have threatened peaceful civilizations under the protection of the Terran Federation. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences." The bridge of Admiral Kreeth's flagship fell, silent. Every Velkoth officer turned to stare at their admiral. No species had ever spoken to them this way. No single ship had ever demanded that the entire Velkoth fleet withdraw. Admiral Kreeth began to laugh. The sound was like grinding crystal, sharp and unpleasant. "Captain Tae-hyung, you command 1 ship. I command 200. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender immediately and your crew will be allowed to live as servants of the Empire." "Admiral," Captain Tae-hyung replied calmly, "you misunderstand the situation. You may command 200 ships, but I command something more valuable." "And what is that?" "Chaos." Before Admiral Kreeth could respond, the Soul opened fire. But not in any pattern the Velkoth had ever seen. Lieutenant Wubin targeted 3 ships simultaneously with quantum torpedoes that moved in curved paths instead of straight lines. Chief Lim activated the Soul's special maneuvering systems, causing the ship to spin and dive in directions that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The Velkoth formation, designed for perfect coordination, became a liability as ships found themselves firing at positions where the Soul no longer was. "Impossible," Admiral Kreeth breathed as he watched the human ship dance between his vessels, like a leaf caught in a hurricane. "How are they moving like that?" "Admiral," one of his officers reported, "the enemy ship's movements don't follow any known tactical doctrine. They appear to be improvising their maneuvers in real time." Improvising? The concept was alien to Velkoth thinking. Ships cannot improvise. Tactics must be calculated and coordinated. But the Soul continued to prove him wrong. Captain Tae-hyung's crew worked together with a fluid creativity that the Velkoth couldn't comprehend. Each officer anticipated what the others would do, but not because they were following a predetermined plan. They were responding to the battle as it developed, adapting their tactics moment by moment. Chief Lim, bring us around to bearing 270. Lieutenant Wubin, target their communication array on the flagship. Sir, that will put us directly between 15 enemy ships. I'm counting on it. The Soul spun through space, using the Velkoth, ships themselves as cover. Admiral Kreeth found himself in the impossible position of being unable to fire at the human ship without hitting his own vessels. All ships, modify formation to Pattern 7, he commanded. But Pattern 7 was designed for fighting enemies who stayed in predictable positions. The Soul was already moving to a new location before the Velkoth ships could complete their repositioning. Lieutenant Wubin fired a series of quantum torpedoes that struck the flagship's communication array. Suddenly, Admiral Kreeth's perfect coordination began to break down. Individual Velkoth captains, cut off from the hive mind's guidance, hesitated for crucial seconds before acting. Captain, Commander Ojina reported, their response time is increasing. Without constant communication, they're having trouble coordinating. Exactly what we hoped for. Sergeant Major Bay, are your teams ready? Yes, sir. Marine boarding parties standing by. Deploy. The Soul launched a series of small craft that moved like angry wasps toward the nearest Velkoth ships. But these weren't conventional boarding shuttles. They were equipped with the same adaptive technology as the Soul itself, making them nearly impossible to target effectively. Sergeant Major Bae Dong-yun led the first boarding team onto a Velkoth cruiser. What they found surprised them. The ship's interior was like a crystal maze, beautiful but sterile. The Velkoth crew moved with mechanical precision, but when confronted with opponents who didn't follow established patterns, they seemed confused. These aliens fight like robots, Bae reported over his communication link. They know exactly what to do against conventional boarding parties. But we're not conventional. Instead of trying to capture the ship, Bae's teams planted explosive charges on critical systems and retreated. When the charges detonated, the Velkoth cruiser was disabled but not destroyed. It would survive, but it was no longer part of the battle. Admiral, one of Kreeth's officers. Admiral Kreeth stared at the human captain on his communication screen. The crystal formations on his head reflected the emergency lighting from his bridge, creating sharp patterns of red and orange. Around him, his officers worked frantically to assess the damage from the Soul's unexpected attack. Terms? Kreeth's voice carried a mixture of anger and confusion. You speak of terms after attacking a superior fleet? This is not how warfare is conducted. Captain Taehyung remained calm. Admiral, you're right. This isn't how warfare is usually conducted. But then again, you've never fought humans before. Humans. Kreeth said the word like he was tasting something bitter. Your species designation was not in our databases. Where do you come from? A place where we learned that the best way to win a war is to change the rules while you're fighting it. Kreeth cut the communication and turned to his tactical officers. Status report. Admiral, we have suffered damage to 17 vessels. The enemy ship appears to be using weapons technology we have never encountered. Their torpedoes can change direction during flight. And their movements? Completely unpredictable, sir. Our targeting computers cannot calculate firing solutions, because the enemy ship never maintains course or speed for more than 30 seconds. Kreeth moved to the central command platform. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders. For 800 years, the Velkoth had perfected the art of coordinated warfare. Every battle followed established patterns. Every victory came through superior organization and overwhelming force. But these humans seemed to ignore every principle of proper military conduct. Admiral, another officer reported, long-range sensors show additional ships approaching from multiple vectors. More human vessels? Unknown, sir. The sensor signatures are chaotic. On the Soul's bridge, Captain Taehyung received a priority communication from Chief Lim. Captain, I'm detecting Governor Thessian's refugee fleet approaching from the outer system. 47 ships of various types. Perfect timing. Taehyung said. Open a channel to all refugee ships. Governor Thessian's face appeared on a secondary screen. The alien leader looked exhausted but hopeful. Captain Taehyung, we came as quickly as we could, but our ships are not military vessels. How can we help? Governor, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Can your ships maintain formation? Yes, but don't maintain formation. I need you to fly like you're trying to escape in 47 different directions. Governor Thessian looked confused. Captain, that would create complete chaos in local space. Exactly. What happened? Next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. The refugee fleet scattered across the Xerion system like seeds thrown into a hurricane. Each ship chose its own course, its own speed, its own destination. To the Velkoth sensors, it looked like random panic. But Captain Taehyung saw opportunity in the chaos. Lieutenant Wubin, are you tracking the refugee ships? Yes, sir. 47 vessels on completely independent courses. Use them. The Soul suddenly accelerated toward the nearest refugee ship, a cargo vessel that was fleeing toward the system's outer planets. To Admiral Kreeth, it appeared that the human warship was pursuing helpless civilians. All ships, intercept the enemy vessel, Kreeth commanded. Protect the civilian craft. It was exactly what Captain Taehyung had hoped for. The Velkoth fleet broke their perfect formation to chase the Soul, spreading themselves across thousands of kilometers of space as they tried to catch a ship that seemed to dart between the refugee vessels like a fish swimming through coral. But the Soul wasn't just running. Every time it passed close to a refugee ship, Lieutenant Wubin launched quantum torpedoes that used the civilian vessel's mass to mask their signatures. By the time the Velkoth ships detected the incoming weapons, the torpedoes were already too close to intercept. Impossible, breathed one of Kreeth's tactical officers as he watched another wave of perfectly coordinated missiles appear from seemingly empty space. How are they launching weapons from civilian ships? They're not, Kreeth realized with growing horror. They're using the civilian ships to hide their weapons until the last moment. But sir, that would require individual targeting calculations for each torpedo based on the random movements of 47 different ships. Exactly. Kreeth finally understood what they were facing. These humans don't think like us. They don't plan like us. They improvise solutions faster than we can adapt to them. The Soul continued its deadly dance through the refugee fleet. Chief Lim pushed the ship's maneuvering systems beyond their design limits, spinning and diving through three-dimensional space in patterns that seemed to defy physics. The Velkoth ships, trained to fight in orderly formations, found themselves scattered across the system, unable to coordinate their attacks. Captain, Commander Ojina reported, Velkoth ships are starting to collide with each other. They're so focused on tracking us that they're not watching their formation spacing. Their greatest strength becomes their greatest weakness, Captain Taehyung observed. They've trained so hard to move together that they've forgotten how to think independently. Sergeant Major Bae Donghyun's voice came over the communication system. Captain, my teams are ready for Phase 2. Deploy. The Soul launched a dozen small craft that scattered in different directions. To the Velkoth, it looked like the human ship was abandoning escape pods. Several Velkoth vessels moved to intercept what they assumed were helpless survivors. Instead, they found Sergeant Major Bae and his Marines. The human boarding craft were unlike anything in the Velkoth databases. They moved like living things, changing direction and speed without warning. When they attached to Velkoth ships, they didn't follow standard boarding procedures. Bae's teams had studied the Velkoth ship designs during the journey to Xerion. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum disruption with minimum effort. Instead of fighting their way to the bridge or engine room, they targeted communication relays and coordination computers. Remember, Bae told his teams over their tactical network, we're not here to capture ships, we're here to break their ability to work together. The Marines planted charges on critical systems and retreated before the Velkoth defenders could organize a proper response. Within minutes, a dozen Velkoth ships found themselves cut off from their fleet's coordination network. Admiral Kreeth watched his perfect fleet dissolve into chaos. Ships that had moved in harmony for centuries suddenly found themselves operating independently. Captains who had never made tactical decisions without consulting the hive mind hesitated at critical moments. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "we're losing communication with ships across the fleet. The human boarding parties are targeting our coordination systems." "Then we adapt," Kreith said grimly. "All ships switch to independent operations. Each captain will engage the enemy using their own judgment." But that command revealed the Velkoth's fatal weakness. Individual Velkoth captains had never learned to think creatively. They had been trained to execute perfect coordinated attacks, not to improvise solutions to unexpected problems. As the Velkoth ships began operating independently, their effectiveness dropped dramatically. They still outnumbered the Sol 200 to 1, but they no longer fought like a unified force. They fought like 200 individual ships, each trying to apply the same tactical solutions to a problem that demanded constant adaptation. Captain Taehyung watched the Velkoth fleet's coordination collapse and knew it was time for the final phase of his plan. "Chief Lim, take us directly at their flagship, maximum speed." "Sir, that's Admiral Kreith's command vessel. It's the most heavily armed ship in their fleet, which is exactly why they won't expect us to attack it head-on." The Sol turned toward the massive Velkoth flagship and accelerated to combat speed. Every sensor in the fleet tracked the human ship as it approached what appeared to be certain destruction. Admiral Kreith smiled for the first time since the battle began. Finally, they make a conventional tactical decision. All ships converge. On the flagship, we will destroy them when they attempt their attack. But Captain Taehyung had no intention of attacking the flagship conventionally. "Lieutenant Wubin, prepare all quantum torpedoes for simultaneous launch. Target every ship that moves to intercept us." "Sir, that's over 50 ships. We don't have enough torpedoes for individual targeting." "We don't need individual targeting, we need area saturation." The Sol fired every torpedo it carried in a single massive volley, but instead of targeting specific ships, the torpedoes were programmed to detonate in a pattern that would create overlapping energy fields throughout the space around the flagship. The Velkoth ships moving to intercept the Sol suddenly found themselves flying through a minefield of quantum explosions. Their perfect formation, designed to maximize firepower and minimize vulnerability, became a death trap as energy cascaded from ship to ship. "All ships, scatter," Admiral Kreith commanded, but it was too late. The quantum field created by the Sol's torpedoes was disrupting the energy flows through his ship's crystalline hulls. Systems failed across the fleet as the aliens' own technology turned against them. In the chaos of the quantum field, the Sol did something that no Velkoth tactician could have predicted. Instead of pressing its attack on the damaged ships, 2 weeks after the Battle of Xerion, news of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy faster than quantum communication networks could carry it. In the council chambers of a dozen different species, alien leaders gathered around holographic displays showing the impossible, the mighty Velkoth Empire, defeated by a single human ship. On the bridge of the Sol, Captain Shin Taehyung read the latest diplomatic messages flooding in from across known space. The Syrian Confederacy had sent 3 separate requests for military alliance discussions. The Nautiloid Republic was offering trade agreements and requesting human military advisors. Even species that had never made contact with anyone were suddenly broadcasting their coordinates and asking for human protection. "Captain," Commander Ojina said, looking up from her communication station, "we're receiving another priority message from Admiral Kreith. He's requesting permission to come aboard." Captain Taehyung set down his datapad and looked at the tactical display. The Velkoth fleet had spent the last 2 weeks in emergency repairs, their perfect formation replaced by chaotic clusters of damaged ships. More than half their vessels were still only partially operational. "Has he explained why he wants to meet face-to-face?" "No, sir. But the message indicates he's willing to come alone, without escort." Lieutenant Han Wubin looked up from his weapons station. "Captain, that would be unprecedented. Velkoth commanders never leave their flagship during military operations. Then he must have something important to discuss." Taehyung made his decision. "Grant permission, but full security protocols. Sergeant Major Bay's teams will escort him from the shuttle bay." An hour later, Admiral Kreith stepped aboard the Sol for the first time. The Velkoth commander was even more impressive in person than he had appeared on communication screens. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the ship's lighting and threw prismatic patterns across the corridor walls. He moved with precise, measured steps that spoke of centuries of military discipline. Sergeant Major Bei Dongyun and 4 Marines escorted the alien admiral through the ship's corridors. Bei noticed that Kreeth observed everything with intense curiosity, studying the human ship's design and layout as if trying to solve a puzzle. Your vessel's internal architecture is chaotic, Kreeth observed as they walked. How so, Admiral? Bei asked. Velkoth ships are designed for maximum efficiency. Every corridor serves a specific purpose. Every room is positioned for optimal function. But your ship seems to have been designed by multiple minds working independently. Bei smiled slightly. Actually, Admiral, that's exactly how it was designed. Different teams of engineers working on different sections, then connecting them together. No single mind could have created something this complex. They entered the Soul's main conference room, where Captain Tae-hyung waited with his senior staff. The room was deliberately simple, with a large table surrounded by chairs that could accommodate various alien physiologies. The only decoration was a large viewing port that showed the stars beyond. Admiral Kreeth examined each human face carefully before taking his seat. Captain Tae-hyung, Commander Oh-jina, Lieutenant Woo-bin, Chief Lim So-young, and Sergeant Major Bei. 5 individuals who had somehow worked together to accomplish what entire civilizations had failed to do. Admiral, Captain Tae-hyung said formally, welcome aboard the Soul. May I ask what brings you here? Kreeth was quiet for a long moment, his crystalline features reflecting the starlight from the viewing port. Captain, in 800 years of Velkoth military history, no enemy has ever forced our fleet to retreat. No species has ever defeated our coordinated tactics. No single ship has ever survived combat against a full Velkoth battle group. And now, Tae-hyung asked, now I must understand how it was possible. Dr. Kang Minji's voice came over the communication system from Earth. She had been monitoring the meeting remotely, ready to provide xenobiological expertise if needed. Admiral Kreeth, if I may ask, how does your species normally learn about new military tactics? Kreeth turned toward the communication speaker. All knowledge is shared through the collective consciousness. When one Velkoth learns a new technique, all Velkoth learn it simultaneously. This allows us to perfect our strategies across the entire species. And that knowledge is coordinated centrally? Yes. Perfect coordination requires perfect information sharing. Captain Tae-hyung leaned forward. Admiral, may I show you something? At Tae-hyung's signal, Lieutenant Woo-bin activated a holographic display showing the Battle of Xerion from multiple perspectives. The humans watched as their own tactics played out in 3-dimensional detail. Tell me, Admiral, when you watch this battle, what do you see? Kreeth studied the display intently. I see chaos. Your ship's movements follow no established patterns. Your weapons fire appears random. Your coordination with the civilian vessels makes no tactical sense. And yet we won. Yes. Kreeth's voice carried a note of frustration. You won using techniques that should not work. Commander Oh-jina spoke up. Admiral, may I ask how Velkoth commanders are trained? We study every successful battle in our history. We memorize the optimal responses to every tactical situation. We practice until our coordination is perfect. And what happens when you encounter a situation that's not in your historical database? Kreeth was quiet for a moment. That has never happened before? Until now, Lieutenant Woo-bin said quietly. Chief Lim So-young activated another section of the holographic display. Admiral, watch this sequence where we use the refugee ships to mask our torpedo approach. How would Velkoth doctrine handle that situation? It would not occur, Kreeth replied immediately. Velkoth forces do not use civilian vessels in combat operations. It is inefficient and unpredictable. But if it did occur, we have no established response to such tactics. Captain Tae-hyung stood up and walked to the viewing port. Beyond, The transparent metal Zarian continued its slow rotation. Its people safe for now. Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We don't have a collective consciousness. Every person on this ship thinks independently. When we face a new problem, 200 different minds start working on 200 different solutions. That sounds inefficient. It is inefficient, it's also unstoppable. Taehyung turned back to face the Velkoth commander. Your species perfected coordination, Admiral. You can execute flawless, predetermined strategies. But when something unexpected happens, your entire military structure freezes while waiting for new orders from the collective. Whereas humans adapt. Every officer on this ship has the authority to make tactical decisions. When Lieutenant Wubin saw an opportunity to use the civilian ships as cover, he didn't wait for orders. When Chief Lim realized your formation was vulnerable to disruption, she acted immediately. When Sergeant Major Bay's teams found weak points in your ship designs, they exploited them without consulting a tactical database. Dr. Minji's voice came through the speakers again. Admiral, this represents a fundamental difference in military philosophy. The Velkoth way creates perfect soldiers who execute perfect plans. The human way creates imperfect soldiers who create perfect adaptation. Admiral Kreeth stood up and walked to the viewing port. His crystalline form reflected the stars, creating patterns of light that seemed to shift and change. Dr. Minji, Captain Taehyung, I must ask you something that may sound strange. Of course, Admiral. Could humans teach other species to fight this way? The question hung in the air like an unexploded quantum torpedo. Captain Taehyung exchanged glances with his officers before responding. Admiral, why would you want to learn human tactics? Because, Kreeth said quietly, the Velkoth Empire has conquered 40 worlds using our methods. But now we have discovered that our methods have limits. If we encounter other species that fight like humans, you would lose. Yes. The admission seemed to pain the proud alien commander. Captain, the Velkoth have never asked another species for help. But I must ask, would humans be willing to share their knowledge of warfare? Sergeant Major Bay spoke up. Admiral, human military doctrine isn't something you can just memorize and download to your collective consciousness. It requires individual creativity, independent thinking, and the ability to make decisions without consulting higher authority. That sounds like the opposite of everything the Velkoth represent, Commander Ojina observed. Exactly, Kreeth replied. And that is why we need to learn it. Captain Taehyung returned to his seat at the conference table. Admiral, are you suggesting that the Velkoth Empire wants to fundamentally change its military structure? I am suggesting that the Velkoth Empire wants to survive. We have encountered a form of warfare that we cannot counter using our current methods. Either we adapt, or we face eventual defeat by any species that learns to fight like humans. The implications of Kreeth's words were staggering. The most militarily successful empire in galactic history was asking for help from a species they had never heard of 2 weeks ago. There would be conditions, Captain Taehyung said carefully. What conditions? First, the Velkoth Empire ends, its expansion. No more conquered worlds. Kreeth nodded. Acceptable. Second, the worlds you've already conquered are given the option of independence or voluntary association. That would be difficult. Many of our subjects, Admiral, Dr. Minji's. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with fear and anger. Hundreds of alien delegates from across the galaxy stood in their special seats, their voices mixing into a loud roar of panic. The massive screens around the circular room showed the same terrible sight over and over again. A huge fleet of unknown ships was moving toward the outer worlds, destroying everything in their path. Admiral Kexnash of the Alterian Federation slammed his four-armed fist on his speaking platform. His blue skin had turned dark with worry. These invaders came from beyond our galaxy, he announced to the crowd. They have already wiped out 3 star systems. Our weapons barely scratched their ships. The room filled with frightened whispers and angry shouts. Many species had never seen such destruction before. The peaceful worlds of the Outer Rim were home to billions of beings who had no way to defend themselves. From the highest platform in the room, Grand Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire stood up slowly. His tall, thin body cast a long shadow over the other delegates. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy as the greatest warriors and builders of the most advanced warships. When Vextar spoke, everyone listened. "Fear will not save our worlds," Vextar said, his voice carrying easily through the huge hall. "The Zephyrian Empire offers to lead a combined fleet against these invaders. Our quantum shield technology and plasma cannons are the most advanced in the galaxy. Together with our allies, we can stop this threat." Many delegates nodded with relief. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful works of art, with smooth curves and glowing energy fields that could slice through asteroids like butter. Their weapons could destroy entire moons, and their shields could turn away the most powerful attacks. The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being made of living glass, rang like a bell when it spoke. "The Collective agrees to join this fleet. Our energy phase weapons will complement your plasma technology perfectly." One by one, the greatest military powers in the galaxy agreed to work together. The Mechanoid Union brought their self-repairing robot ships. The Void Walkers offered their ships that could appear and disappear in battles. The Plasma Lords promised their sun-powered weapons that could burn through anything. But in a small section of the hall, Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth sat quietly. She was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and tired eyes. Most of the other delegates had forgotten that humans were even part of the Galactic Council. Earth was considered a backwater world with primitive technology. Admiral Vextar noticed the human sitting alone. A cruel smile crossed his face. "Ambassador Chen," he called out, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "Surely Earth wants to contribute to this great effort. Perhaps you could offer some of your charming metal ships?" Laughter rippled through the hall. Everyone knew about human ships. They were big, ugly blocks of metal that moved slowly through space. While other species had learned to use pure energy for everything, humans still used old-fashioned rockets and bullets. Their ships looked like they belonged in a museum, not in a real space battle. Sarah Chen stood up calmly. She was not tall or impressive like the other delegates, but something in her eyes made a few of the smarter aliens stop laughing. "Earth will defend its territory," she said simply. "Our fleet is already in position." This caused even more laughter. The Zephyrian admiral could barely control himself. "Your fleet? Those ancient relics that barely made it to your moon? My dear ambassador, this is serious warfare, not a parade of historical curiosities." A mechanoid unit clicked and whirred as it spoke. "Human ships still use chemical explosions for power. Our databases show they have not updated their designs in centuries. It would be cruel to let them face these invaders." Sarah Chen did not show any anger at the insults. She had heard them all before. "The human fleet will hold the Sol system," she repeated. "We ask only that you give us time to evacuate our civilians if we fail." More laughter filled the hall. Grand Admiral Vextar shook his head in what looked like pity. "Very well, Ambassador. We will rescue your survivors after we deal with the real fighting. Try not to get in our way." The meeting ended with grand speeches about galactic unity and advanced technology. The combined alien fleet would meet at the edge of human space, then move out to face the invaders. It was the largest gathering of warships in galactic history, with thousands of vessels equipped with the most advanced weapons known to science. As the delegates filed out of the hall, many of them joked about the humans and their old ships. Some wondered if the human fleet would even show up to fight. Others bet on how quickly the human ships would be destroyed when they met real enemy fire. But Sarah Chen walked alone back to her small transport ship. She activated a secure communication channel to Earth. "Council Command, this is Ambassador Chen. The other species will arrive at Sol in 48 hours. Status of home fleet?" The voice that answered was calm and professional. "All ships are in position, Ambassador. The boys and girls are ready. Tell them the galaxy is watching," Sarah said. Time to remind everyone why humans don't build pretty ships. Far away in the Sol system, Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable. Through the thick armored windows, she could see the rest of the human defense fleet spread out in formation. Each ship was exactly what the aliens had said: a massive block of metal and armor, covered in weapon turrets and communication arrays. The Indomitable itself was over 60 years old. Its hull was scarred from a dozen different battles and covered with patches and repairs. The main guns were huge metal cylinders that looked primitive compared to the glowing energy weapons of other species. The engines were simple fusion drives that pushed the ship forward with bright flames instead of the elegant energy fields used by advanced aliens. Rodriguez was a veteran of the Mars colony wars and the asteroid mining conflicts. Her face was weathered and serious, marked by years of commanding ships in battle. She had served on the Indomitable for 20 years, and she knew every bolt and wire on the old ship. "Captain," her communications officer called out. "Long-range sensors are picking up the alien fleet approaching from Galactic North. Estimated arrival in 36 hours. Rodriguez nodded. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations. Unlike the clean, automated bridges of alien ships, the human bridge was full of manual controls, backup systems, and redundant equipment. Everything was built to work even if half the ship was destroyed. "Signal the fleet," Rodriguez ordered. "All ships to battle stations. Begin final preparations." Across the human formation, old warships that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard began to hum with hidden power. Crews that had trained for this moment their entire lives moved through familiar routines. Weapons that seemed ancient were loaded with ammunition that could crack planets. The aliens were coming with their pretty ships and advanced technology. They thought they understood warfare because they had powerful weapons and strong shields. But they had never fought humans before. They were about to learn that sometimes the oldest ships carried the biggest surprises. The combined alien fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system like a glowing cloud of deadly beauty. Thousands of ships spread across space in perfect formation, their hulls shimmering with energy shields and their weapons glowing with contained power. Grand Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Cosmic Triumph. The ship was a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering, shaped like a graceful bird with wings made of pure energy. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see his magnificent fleet arranged in attack formations that had been perfected over centuries of warfare. "Report," Vextar commanded, his 4 eyes focusing on the tactical display. His weapons officer, a young Zephyrian with bright silver skin, looked up from his console with excitement. "Sir, our scanners have located the human defensive fleet. They are positioned in a loose formation around the 4th planet, Mars, according to our star charts." "Show me," Vexitar ordered. The main screen filled with an image that made several bridge officers laugh out loud. The human fleet looked exactly like the jokes they had heard at the Galactic Council. 67 ships hung in space like ancient metal boxes, their hulls dark and scarred. Compared to the elegant curves and glowing energy fields of the alien vessels, they looked like chunks of old metal that someone had forgotten to throw away. "By the 7 suns," breathed Captain Thexley of the Crystalline Collective, his voice coming through the communication system. "Are those actually warships? They look like cargo haulers from my great-grandfather's time." The mechanoid admiral's electronic voice crackled with amusement. "My databases indicate those designs are at least 200 years old. The largest vessel appears to be using a basic fusion drive system. How quaint." Vexitar studied the human formation with the eye of an experienced warrior. The ships were spread out randomly with no elegant battle patterns or coordinated energy fields. Their weapons appeared to be simple metal turrets that stuck out from the hull like old-fashioned cannons. "Magnify the lead vessel," he ordered. The image zoomed in on the UES Indomitable, and the laughter on the bridge grew louder. The ship was covered in patches and repairs, like an old ground vehicle that had been fixed too many times. Its main guns were huge metal cylinders that pointed forward like the weapons of ancient warships from primitive worlds. "Sir," the scanning officer reported, trying to control his laughter. "Their communication system is using simple radio waves, not even quantum encryption. Should we establish contact?" "Oh yes," Vextar said with a cruel smile. "Let us speak to these brave warriors." The communication went out on all frequencies, broadcasting in the common galactic language. Vextar's voice was smooth and mocking. "Human vessels, this is Grand Admiral Vexitar of the Zephyrian Empire, commanding the combined galactic fleet. You are clearly outmatched and outgunned. Surrender now, and we will ensure your safe evacuation before we deal with the real threat to the galaxy." For a long moment, there was silence. Then a simple radio transmission came back from the human flagship. The voice was calm and professional, with a slight accent that sounded strange to alien ears. "Unknown fleet. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the United Earthship Indomitable, commanding the Sol Defense Force. Your intentions in this system are unclear, State your business or withdraw immediately. The alien bridge officers looked at each other in amazement. Did these primitive humans really think they could give orders to the most powerful fleet in galactic history? Vextar leaned forward in his command chair. Captain Rodriguez, perhaps you do not understand the situation. We represent over 50 advanced civilizations. Our ships carry weapons that can destroy planets. Your ancient vessels pose no threat to us whatsoever. This is your final chance to surrender with dignity. Another pause, then Rodriguez's voice came back, even calmer than before. Negative. The Sol Defense Force will not stand down. Human territory is protected by human ships and human crews. If you wish to pass through this system, you will need to go through us. The bridge erupted in laughter. A Plasma Lord commander's fiery voice crackled over the communication system. Did they just challenge us to battle? With those museum pieces? Sir, the tactical officer reported, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. Detailed scans show their armor is simple metal alloys. Their weapons appear to be kinetic projectile systems. They still use bullets and explosives. My readings indicate they are not even using proper energy shields. Vexitar stood up, his tall form casting shadows across the bridge. Through the viewing ports, he could see the human ships hanging in space like dark, silent threats. But they were not threats at all. They were relics from a bygone age, manned by a species too stubborn to understand how outclassed they were. All ships, prepare for battle, Vextar announced to his fleet. Weapons to minimum power. We do not want to vaporize them completely. Perhaps we can disable their engines and take some prisoners for study. It will be interesting to see how these primitives have survived so long with such ancient technology. Across the alien fleet, thousands of weapon systems came online. Plasma cannons glowed white-hot, energy lances crackled with contained lightning, and quantum disruptors hummed with the power to tear apart atomic bonds. The combined firepower was enough to crack a moon or boil away an ocean. In contrast, the human ship sat silent and dark. No energy signatures, no glowing weapons, no sign of advanced technology at all. To the alien sensors, they looked dead in space, powered only by their primitive fusion reactors. Captain Rodriguez received the tactical report on her bridge with the same calm expression she had worn for 20 years of combat. They're powering weapons, her sensor operator reported. Energy readings are off the charts, Captain. Every ship in that fleet could destroy a city by itself. Acknowledged, Rodriguez replied. She looked around her bridge at the men and women who had served with her through the Mars conflicts and the asteroid wars. They were all veterans, all professionals, all ready to do their job. Signal the fleet, she ordered. All ships to condition red. Weapons free. Prepare to engage. Throughout the human formation, old warships that had seemed dead suddenly came alive, but not in ways the aliens could understand. Instead of glowing energy fields, they showed heat signatures from dozens of hidden systems. Instead of exotic weapon displays, they simply turned their ugly metal turrets toward the enemy. The aliens had made their first mistake. They thought they understood what they were looking at. They saw old ships with old weapons and assumed they were fighting an old enemy. They were about to discover that there is a difference between old and obsolete, between primitive and ineffective. The human fleet had been built for one purpose, refined through centuries of warfare, and crewed by people who had learned that in space combat. It did not matter how pretty your ship looked. It only mattered if your ship could kill the enemy and survive to fight again. All ships, stand by for engagement, Rodriguez announced calmly. Remember, these aliens have never fought humans before. Let's show them what they missed in those fancy academies of theirs. The alien fleet began to move forward, confident in their technological superiority. Behind them, the real invaders from beyond the galaxy watched through their own sensors, curious to see how these two forces would fare against each other. The stage was set for a battle that would change how the galaxy thought about humanity forever. The first alien attack came like a storm of rainbow-colored death. Thousands of energy weapons fired at once, filling space with streams of plasma, quantum lightning, and pure destructive force. The beams struck the human ships in brilliant flashes that could be seen from Mars itself. On the bridge of the Cosmic Triumph, Grand Admiral Vextar watched with satisfaction as his fleet's opening salvo hammered the primitive human vessels. The energy readings from the impacts were enormous, enough to vaporize any normal ship several times over. Direct hits across their entire formation, his weapons officer reported with excitement. Sir, those ships should be nothing but vapor by now. But as the brilliant flashes faded, something impossible appeared on the tactical displays. The human ships were still there. Not only were they undamaged, but their energy signatures were actually growing stronger. "What?" Vextar demanded, leaning forward in his command chair. "Scan them again!" "Those readings cannot be correct." His scanning officer's hands danced over his controls, his silver skin turning pale with confusion. "Sir, the readings are accurate. Somehow their power output is increasing. It's as if our weapons are feeding energy into their systems instead of destroying them." Across the alien fleet, similar reports flooded the communication channels. Captains who had been laughing moments before now spoke with growing concern and confusion. "Impossible," declared Captain Thexley of the Crystalline Collective. "Nothing can absorb that much plasma energy and survive. Their ships should be molten metal by now." But the human ships hung in space, dark and seemingly unchanged. Only the subtle energy readings told the true story of what had just happened. Deep within those ugly metal hulls, systems that the aliens had never imagined were quietly converting their energy attacks into power. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Rodriguez watched her power displays climb steadily upward. "Energy absorption at 90% efficiency," her engineering officer reported with a slight smile. "All capacitor banks are charging nicely, Captain." "Thank you, Commander Hayes," Rodriguez replied calmly. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations with the professional calm of people who had expected exactly this result. The Indomitable's hull looked like simple metal to alien scanners, but appearances were deceiving. Hidden beneath layers of ablative armor were metamaterial grids designed to channel energy attacks directly into the ship's power systems. What looked like primitive metal plating was actually a complex system that could absorb and redirect almost any form of energy weapon. This technology had been developed during the Mars colony wars, when human ships had faced energy-based mining lasers turned into weapons. Instead of building stronger armor, human engineers had learned to make armor that could drink energy attacks and grow stronger from them. Admiral Vextar stared at his displays in growing alarm. "Fire again!" "Maximum power. All ships concentrate fire on the lead vessel." The second barrage was even more intense than the first. Every ship in the alien fleet poured energy into the human flagship, enough power to crack a small moon. The space around the Indomitable turned white-hot with contained fury, and when the light faded, the old human ship was not only intact, it was moving. "By the seven suns," breathed Vextar as his sensors showed the impossible truth. The human ship was accelerating directly toward his fleet, its primitive fusion drive suddenly blazing with power that seemed impossible for such an old design. What the aliens did not understand was that human fusion drives were not primitive at all. They were variable output engines that could run on minimum power for years, or push their reactors to dangerous limits when battle demanded it. While alien ships relied on steady, efficient energy sources, human ships were built like coiled springs, ready to release enormous power when needed. Across the human formation, 67 ships that had seemed dead in space suddenly roared to life. Their engines flared like newborn stars as they surged forward, closing the distance to the alien fleet with startling speed. "This is impossible," Vextar shouted. "Those ships should not be able to move that fast. Our intelligence said they were slow and clumsy." His tactical officer's voice was tight with fear. "Sir, they are accelerating at 12 standard gravities. At their current rate, they will be within our formation in 18 minutes. All ships evasive maneuvers," Vextar ordered. "Do not let them close the distance." But the alien fleet, for all its advanced technology, had been designed for long-range energy combat. Their ships were fast and maneuverable, but they were not built for the kind of brutal close-quarters fighting that human ships were made for. The Zephyrian vessels were works of art, with graceful curves and delicate energy projectors. They were perfect for elegant battles between civilized species who fought with honor and style. But they had never faced an enemy that built ships like hammers and fought like cornered animals. Captain Rodriguez stood calmly on her bridge as the distance to the enemy fleet shrank rapidly. Through the armored viewing ports, she could see the alien ships beginning to scatter, their beautiful formations breaking apart as panic set in. "Captain," her weapons officer reported, "we are approaching optimal firing range. All guns are loaded and ready." "All ships, this is Indomitable," Rodriguez announced over the fleet communication system. "Time to show these pretty boys what real warships look like. Weapons free, engage at will." What happened next would be remembered in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The human ships, ugly and scarred as they were, opened fire with weapons that the aliens had dismissed as primitive relics. But there was nothing primitive about a railgun that could accelerate a tungsten rod to 15% of light speed. There was nothing obsolete about missiles that used quantum-encrypted guidance systems immune to alien jamming. There was nothing ancient about nuclear warheads that could crack asteroids in half. The first human salvo tore through the alien formation like a hurricane through a flower garden. Railgun rounds moving at incredible speeds punched through energy shields as if they were not there, turning beautiful alien ships into expanding clouds of debris. Missiles that looked like simple chemical rockets suddenly revealed guidance systems more advanced than anything in the alien fleet. They twisted and turned through defensive fire, their artificial intelligence minds calculating paths to targets with inhuman precision, and behind the kinetic weapons came the nuclear fire. Warheads that had been designed to destroy asteroid mining facilities released their fury among the alien ships, turning the elegant vessels into brief, bright stars. "Shields are useless," screamed a mechanoid captain over the communication system. "The projectiles are moving too fast. They punch right through our energy barriers. My ship is hit," reported a Plasma Lord commander. "Hull breach on all decks. We are losing atmosphere." Vextar watched in horror as his beautiful fleet was torn apart by weapons he had thought were museum pieces. His tactical display showed ship after ship going dark as human fire found its mark with deadly precision. "How?" he whispered, staring at the approaching human vessels. "How are they doing this?" The answer was simple, but it was one that the advanced alien civilizations had forgotten in their pursuit of elegant technology. The humans had never stopped fighting each other. While other species had achieved peace and focused on making their weapons more sophisticated, humans had spent centuries making their weapons more deadly. Every human ship was a veteran of multiple conflicts. Every weapon system had been tested in actual combat. Every design had been refined through the harsh teacher of battlefield experience. The aliens had built ships to impress other aliens. The humans had built ships to kill enemies and survive battles. There was a difference, and that difference was about to cost the alien fleet everything. As the human ships closed to point-blank range, their battered hulls scarred but intact, Admiral Vextar finally understood the mistake his fleet had made. They had not been fighting primitives at all. They had been fighting specialists. The human fleet crashed into the alien formation like an avalanche of metal and fury. At close range, the true nature of human warfare revealed itself in all its terrifying efficiency. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as her ship's main guns rotated toward the alien flagship. The massive weapons systems, which had looked primitive and clumsy to alien eyes, now showed their true purpose. Each gun barrel was longer than most alien ships, designed to accelerate projectiles to speeds that could crack planets. "Target the large Zephyrian vessel," Rodriguez ordered calmly. "Main guns, fire for effect." The Indomitable shook as its primary weapons unleashed their fury. Twin streams of tungsten rods, each one accelerated to 15% of light speed, streaked across space toward Vextar's flagship. The projectiles moved so fast that they appeared as brief lines of light against the darkness. Grand Admiral Vextar had less than a second to register the incoming fire before it struck. The tungsten rods hit his ship's energy shields and passed through them as if they did not exist. The projectiles punched through the graceful hull of the Cosmic Triumph like bullets through paper, creating perfectly round holes that immediately began venting atmosphere and energy. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 12, his damage control officer shouted over the sound of alarms. "Sir, our shields cannot stop solid projectiles moving at those speeds." All around the alien fleet, the same scene was playing out. Ships that had been built to fight energy-based battles found themselves helpless against kinetic weapons that simply ignored their defenses. Energy shields that could turn away the most powerful plasma beams were useless against chunks of metal, moving at incredible velocities. The human ships moved through the alien formation like predators among prey. Their ugly, scarred hulls absorbed energy weapon hits and converted the power to their own systems, while their primitive-looking guns tore through alien defenses with contemptuous ease. UES Thermopylae, a heavy cruiser that had fought in the asteroid wars, engaged 3 mechanoid vessels at once. The robot ships tried to surround the human vessel, their sleek forms dancing through space as they poured energy fire into the old cruiser's hull. But the Thermopylae had been built for exactly this kind of fight. Its captain, Commander Sarah Park, had learned her trade in the brutal close-quarters battles of the mining conflicts. She knew that in real combat, there was no substitute for thick armor, powerful guns, and the will to use them. "Rotate ship, bring all guns to bear," Park ordered. "Show these machines how humans fight." The Thermopylae spun on its axis, bringing dozens of weapon turrets into firing position. What the aliens had mistaken for simple chemical guns were actually a mix of railguns, missile launchers, and point defense systems that had been refined through decades of human versus human warfare. The broadside that erupted from the human cruiser was like nothing the mechanoid vessels had ever faced. Railgun rounds shredded their robotic hulls while guided missiles curved around their defensive fire to strike from unexpected angles. Nuclear-tipped torpedoes detonated among their formation, turning the elegant robot ships into glowing clouds of vaporized metal. "Impossible," transmitted the surviving mechanoid commander. "Our armor is composed of self-repairing smart materials. These weapons should not be able to damage us." But human weapons had been designed to fight human armor, which was often just as advanced as anything the aliens possessed. Nuclear-tipped penetrator rounds did not care about self-repairing materials when they could vaporize entire sections of hull in microseconds. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human ships demonstrated the brutal effectiveness of their combat systems. The UES Marathon engaged a squadron of crystalline collective vessels, its missile batteries filling space with hundreds of guided warheads that twisted and turned through defensive fire like living things. The crystalline ships, beautiful constructs of living glass and energy, tried to use their phase shift technology to avoid the incoming missiles. But human guidance systems had been designed to track targets that could jump between dimensions, a technology developed during conflicts with rebel colonies that had access to experimental jump drives. The missiles followed their targets through multiple phase shifts, their quantum-encrypted brains calculating intercept courses that seemed impossible. When they finally struck, the crystalline hulls shattered like windows hit by hammers, sending rainbow fragments spinning through space. Captain Rodriguez watched the battle unfold around her flagship with the calm professionalism of someone who had seen it all before. To the aliens, this was a shocking display of primitive brutality. To her, it was Tuesday. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "Admiral Vextar is trying to contact us." "Put him through," Rodriguez replied, never taking her eyes off the tactical display where alien ships were dying by the dozens. Vextar's image appeared on the main screen, and Rodriguez could see the fear and confusion in his alien features. Behind him, his bridge was filled with smoke and the sound of damage control teams working frantically. "Captain Rodriguez," Vextar said, his voice strained with desperation, "this slaughter must stop. We came here to help defend the galaxy against invaders. We are not your enemies." Rodriguez looked at him with the same expression she might use to examine an insect. "You entered human space with weapons charged and made demands for our surrender. In my experience, Admiral, that makes you an enemy. But we are advanced civilizations," Vextar protested. "We have laws of warfare, codes of honor. This is butchery." "This is warfare," Rodriguez replied simply. "Your people have spent centuries making your ships prettier and your weapons more elegant. My people have spent centuries making our ships tougher and our weapons more lethal. The difference is showing." Around the Indomitable, the human fleet continued its methodical destruction of the alien formation, ships that had taken decades to build and represented. The pinnacle of their species' technology were being reduced to scrap metal in minutes. The UES Gettysburg cornered a Voidwalker, ship that was trying to escape by phasing into subspace. The human vessel's weapons officer had dealt with similar tricks during the rebellion of the outer colonies, and he knew exactly how to handle enemies that could disappear from normal space. "Tachyon pulse full spread," he ordered. The Gettysburg fired a barrage of exotic particles that disrupted the subspace continuum itself, forcing the Voidwalker ship back into normal space directly in front of the human vessel's main guns. The resulting explosion lit up half the solar system. Meanwhile, the UES Valley Forge engaged in a knife fight with a Plasma Lord dreadnought, the two ships so close that their hulls almost touched. The alien ship poured solar fire into the human vessel's armor, turning sections of hull white-hot with contained star fury. But the Valley Forge had been designed for exactly this kind of punishment. Its armor was not just metal, It was layers of reactive materials, heat sinks, and emergency systems that could function even when most of the ship was on fire. The human crew continued to fight even as their bridge filled with smoke and their hull glowed with heat. The alien ship, for all its power, had never been built to take damage. When the Valley Forge's point-blank railgun fire finally penetrated the Plasma Lord's elegant hull, the alien vessel came apart like a flower in a blast furnace. Admiral Vextar watched his proud fleet being systematically destroyed by weapons and tactics he had never imagined. These humans fought without honor, without elegance, without any consideration for the accepted rules of civilized warfare. They fought to win. All ships, retreat, Vextar finally ordered, his voice breaking with the shame of defeat. All vessels withdraw immediately. We cannot win this battle. But Captain Rodriguez was not finished with her lesson. Negative, Admiral, she said over the open channel. You came here to judge human capabilities. The demonstration is not yet complete. The human fleet began to move again, pursuing the fleeing alien ships with the relentless determination of hunting wolves. They had been dismissed as primitives, laughed at as relics, ignored as irrelevant. Now it was time to make sure the galaxy never made that mistake again. The battle that had begun with alien laughter ended with alien screams. Across the solar system, the wreckage of what had once been the most advanced fleet in galactic history drifted in slowly expanding clouds of debris. Grand Admiral Vextar's flagship limped through space, its elegant hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere from dozens of wounds. Half his bridge crew was dead or injured, and the beautiful energy fields that had once surrounded his ship flickered weakly like dying candles. Casualty report, Vextar demanded, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. His surviving tactical officer, her silver skin burned black from electrical fires, looked up from her damaged console. Sir, we have lost 68% of the fleet. Most of the survivors are heavily damaged and barely able to maintain life support. 68%, nearly 7,000 ships representing 50 different civilizations and centuries of technological advancement, had been destroyed or disabled by 67 human vessels that looked like they belonged in a museum. How many human ships have we destroyed? Vextar asked, though he dreaded the answer. None, sir, came the whispered reply. Several human vessels show battle damage, but all remain operational. Their casualty reports indicate minimal crew losses. Vextar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human ships hung in space around his fleeing survivors like dark wolves surrounding a wounded herd. Their hulls were scorched and scarred from the battle, but not one had been destroyed. Not one had even been disabled. The communication board crackled to life with the voice of Captain Rodriguez. Her tone was as calm and professional as it had been at the beginning of the battle, as if the complete destruction of a galactic fleet was simply another day's work. Admiral Vextar, this is Captain Rodriguez. You are ordered to withdraw from human space immediately. Any vessel that attempts to return will be destroyed without warning. Wait, Vextar called out desperately.
Captain, please.
We must speak. The real threat to the galaxy is still out there. The invaders from beyond our borders, they are the ones we came to fight. There was a pause, then Rodriguez's voice returned with a slight note of interest. Explain. There is a fleet of unknown ships moving through the Outer Rim territories, Vextar said quickly, afraid that the humans might start shooting again at any moment. They have already destroyed 3 star systems. Our combined fleet was formed to stop them before they reached the core worlds. Another pause. When Rodriguez spoke again, her voice carried a hint of something that might have been amusement. And you thought the best strategy was to demand the surrender of the only species in the galaxy that still knows how to fight a real war? The truth of that statement hit Vextar like a physical blow. In their arrogance, they had tried to push aside the one military force that might actually be able to help them. Worse, they had revealed their own weakness and incompetence in the most humiliating way possible. Captain, Vextar said, his pride finally cracking completely, we need your help. Our weapons and tactics are useless against enemies who do not follow the accepted rules of civilized warfare. But your people, you fight like they do. Like killers. We fight like survivors, Rodriguez corrected him. There's a difference. We don't kill because we enjoy it, Admiral. We kill because we're very, very good at it, and because sometimes that's what the situation requires. Through his damaged viewports, Vextar could see the human ships slowly moving back to their defensive positions. Even now, after demonstrating their overwhelming superiority, they maintained their formations and kept their weapons ready. These were not conquerors or glory seekers. These were professionals doing a job. "What do you know about these invaders?" Rodriguez asked. Vextar quickly transmitted what little data his fleet had managed to gather. Ships of unknown design, using weapons that ignored conventional defenses, showing no interest in communication or diplomacy. They simply appeared, destroyed everything in a system, and moved on to the next target. "Sounds familiar," Rodriguez said after reviewing the data. "Mass extinction events, total destruction of infrastructure. No apparent interest in conquest or negotiation." Captain Martinez analysis. Another human voice joined the communication, calm and analytical. "Classic extermination pattern, Captain. Similar to the Titan Corporation's scorched earth tactics during the Jupiter conflicts, but on a much larger scale. These invaders aren't trying to conquer territory. They're trying to eliminate all life in the galaxy." Vextar felt his heart skip a beat. The human officers were discussing galactic extinction as if it were a tactical problem to be solved, not the end of civilization itself. "Recommendations?" Rodriguez asked. "Standard anti-extinction protocol," Martinez replied. "Find them, fix them, and finish them. Though we'll need to coordinate with local forces to be effective at this scale." "Local forces?" Rodriguez's voice carried a note of dry humor. "You mean these gentlemen who just demonstrated that they couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag?" There was laughter on the human communication channel. Actual laughter, as if the complete defeat of the Galactic fleet was amusing rather than terrifying. "Captain Rodriguez," Vextar interrupted desperately. "Will you help us?" "That depends, Admiral. Are you willing to follow human tactical doctrine? Because I can tell you right now that our way of fighting is nothing like what you're used to. We don't worry about honor or elegance or minimizing collateral damage. When we fight an extinction-level threat, we fight to win, and we use every weapon available." Vextar thought about his beautiful ships, reduced to scrap metal in less than an hour. He thought about the elegant tactics and honorable combat traditions that had proven utterly worthless against an enemy that simply ignored them. "Yes," he said finally. "We will follow your lead." "Good. Signal your surviving ships to form up behind the human fleet. We're going hunting." As word of the battle spread across the galaxy, the impact was immediate and profound. The species that had mocked humanity's primitive technology fell silent as the reports came in. The combined fleet of the most advanced civilizations in known space had been destroyed by weapons that still used bullets and explosives. On 100 different worlds, military analysts studied the battle recordings with growing amazement and horror. The humans had not just won. They had won so completely that it redefined what galactic warfare looked like. Ambassador Sarah. Chen received the reports, in her quarters aboard the transport ship, carrying her back to Earth. She read through the casualty lists and damage assessments with the same calm expression she had worn at the Galactic Council. Her aide, a young diplomat named Jackson, looked up from his datapad with wide eyes. "Ambassador, the galactic media is calling it the most one-sided military defeat in recorded history. Some of them are saying that humanity represents a threat to galactic peace." Sarah Chen smiled for the first time in weeks. "Let them think what they want, Jackson. The important thing is that they're finally taking us seriously." Meanwhile, in the depths of space beyond the galaxy's edge, the real invaders watched the battle through their own sensors. Their artificial intelligence systems analyzed the human tactics and weapons with cold, calculating precision. For the first time since beginning their campaign of extermination, they encountered something unexpected, a species that fought the way they did, a species that built weapons for killing rather than showing off, a species that treated warfare as a profession rather than an art form. The invaders began to recalculate their plans. The galaxy's defenders were not as weak as they had assumed. At least some of them knew how to fight a real war. Back in the Sol system, Captain Rodriguez stood on her bridge and watched the alien survivors form up behind her fleet. They flew in ragged formations, their beautiful ship scarred and broken, their crews humbled by defeat. But they were still alive, and they were still willing to fight. That was something she could work with. "All ships, this is Rodriguez," she announced to the combined human and alien fleet. "Set course for the Outer Rim territories. Time to show these invaders what happens when they threaten our galaxy." The human ships turned toward deep space, their ugly hulls scarred but intact, their crews ready for whatever came next. Behind them followed the remnants of the Galactic fleet, no longer laughing at the relics from Sol. They had learned the hard way that sometimes the oldest ships carried the biggest guns, and the most primitive species knew the most about war. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.